Wait, remember Time Squad? It's the combination you get from taking time travel, Mark Hamill, and Cartoon Network. It's also this very obscure memory I've kept with me for a long time that I am personally happy to scratch the itch of nostalgia for. Time Squad was an interesting idea of maintaining the course of history and fixing any problems with the timeline to keep the future as perfect as it is. Along the way, meeting historical figures from Abraham Lincoln to Leonardo da Vinci to George W. Bush, but that one specifically we'll talk about later. Running for a short-lived 2 seasons with 26 episodes, Time Squad premiered on Cartoon Network June 8, 2001, until the final episode on November 26, 2003. It was popular enough to pave the way for Uncharted 3's Subway promotion in 2011 by doing something even better, and that's giving Time Squad-themed toys within the kids' meals. I don't know why I felt I had to tell you that right now. I'm probably just hungry. Yeah, I'd go back in time for this.
Good luck, jerk!
Now a word from our sponsor.
Speaking of time, I'd like to take some time today to thank this video's sponsor, Supernova by Hunt-A-Killer. Now, Supernova is a bit different from the usual Hunt-A-Killer crime-solving games, as they've shifted to a comic book-inspired sci-fi mystery. Not missing a moment when you start, you are now a member of the official Supernova fan club, where you are then reached out to by the creator of the series, revealing to you that the hero Supernova is actually his twin sister, whose real name is Halo. Now he needs your help to find and save his sister. Here is this really cool Supernova box sent to me with everything I need to get solving this mystery. What's awesome is that, like all the previous mysteries and crime-solving games from Hunt-A-Killer, it's perfect to play with others to spice up a typical board game get-together. With Supernova and my love for sci-fi, this one is perfect for me, especially to play over and over to uncover and learn everything about the lore. The action figure, the comic book, an actual cipher dial, this throwback lunchbox, a bunch of properly themed items that give off the best nostalgic old-school sci-fi vibes out there, with so many secrets to unravel and so much more. It's a story-driven experience that you can play on your own or with a group of friends, especially if you enjoy games where your imagination helps drive the narrative. Supernova is a medium difficulty mystery. You'll have to pay close attention to not miss a single detail with puzzle solving, cipher decoding, understanding this alien language, and much more. If you ever need help or want to chat with others about Supernova, there's a spoiler-free online community with over 100,000 people waiting for you to start your experience. So head over to huntakiller.com/fringe or use code FRINGE for $10 off Supernova today. Thanks again to Hunt-A-Killer for sponsoring today's video.
Do you mind? I'm in the middle of sending an important message.
Time Squad, a show about Earth being a peaceful, unified utopia without conflicts, pollution, or Twitter. But in order to maintain this reality, the Time Squad organization was formed for that exact purpose, protecting Earth's peaceful future by making sure the timeline stays in the proper order. So basically the TVA, but with Mark Hamill. It's an easy enough concept to get behind, and it sets in motion your expectations of what's to come. In the show, we follow around 3 time cops, well, 2 time cops and then 1 that may be breaking child labor laws. Buck, Larry 3000, and Otto. An odd trio of a big buff, not so smart human, a smart but easily annoyed robot, and an orphan. We'll look into them individually shortly, but traveling back from the year 3000, sorry, couldn't help it. Got the Jonas Brothers on the brain. The year they actually come from is 100 million AD, a year so far in the future that this timeline correction job may be a pretty big task overall. But what does correcting and maintaining the course of history actually mean in the case of this show specifically? Predominantly, it means traveling to major historical events, at least up until current history at the time of 2002, and that one time in the year 3000, and we're all looking forward to it. And no, that is not another Jonas Brothers reference. But yeah, we just don't really get into what happens between 2002 and 100 million. Just seems like a whole lot was left out there. The show would focus on adventures through time between the time of the dinosaurs and the beginning of the 2000s, with a plethora of famous artists, politicians, scientists, and more from their respective time periods. Usually when we would find them, they'd be doing some wacky or weird antics that make them out of sync with where the timeline would need them to be. And the Time Squad would need to set them back on the correct course. We don't want any branching timelines now, do we? You'd have stuff like Abraham Lincoln trying to become a prankster, rather than the President of the United States. Would love to see what that YouTube channel would look like.
Oink! Here, you want it? You really want it back?
Oh, well, I guess just like that. You'd also have stuff like Winston Churchill just churchillin' in the nude? Yeah, this show played with its large assortment of historical figures in many ways, all for jokes, some for the silliness and absurdness of it all, and some for the actual satire of the situation. It was a really good blend of comedy, action, historical events, and science fiction. Naturally, to overlook any issues in the timeline, the Time Trio have their base of operations within an orbiting satellite, which oddly enough serves as a contrast to the high-tech, well-organized life down below on Earth, as the satellite resembles something much more dystopian. Now, let's take a look at these three distinctly different characters. First, let's talk about Buck Tud Russell, the leader of the group here. To describe this large and in-charge dude, the words would be impulsive and narrow-minded, favoring the muscles over the mind. His lack of calculation before doing anything causes some clashes with the team and how to get their job done. Despite these, what you might consider shortcomings, Buck on occasion does have this hidden knowledge showcasing scientific and historical information that does provide aid during their missions. Even with his thick Southern-esque tough macho man drawl, he is voiced by the same person responsible for this guy. Yup, Rob Paulsen. Luckily, his character doesn't come off as one-dimensional, like just being the buff guy who can use his fists to solve problems. Instead, we get to see him deal with his anger issues, how he views himself as a person, and issues within his past relationships. A lot of this is what helps in his nearly father-like relationship with Otto. Otto Osworth is the unofficial newest member of the Time Squad who joins them after leaving behind his life in an orphanage back in 2001, thanks to both Buck and Larry adopting him to their time-traveling family. During the pilot episode, when Buck and Larry travel back to 2001, Otto endures the cruelness of the nuns at his orphanage as well as the other kids there. Having a soft spot, the two time travelers, despite it being extremely prohibited to do so, break the rules and take Otto with them. It's a nice introduction to Otto and putting this very odd trio together. What makes him useful to the team is his knowledge of history pre-2001 and offers a level head to the group in extreme situations. Now, even though he is kind-hearted and works extremely well when it comes to problem solving, Otto is still a child, dealing with his smaller world views, which is where both Buck and Larry come in to aid in those discussions. Aside from that, he can also pal around and goof off with Buck to let out that childlike energy. He is voiced by the talented Pamela Adlon. But while Buck is the more rambunctious fun parent, we still have to discuss Larry 3000, Andre 3000's distant cousin. Well, that was a lie, but the name is still great. Voiced by Mark Hamill. If you couldn't tell, I've said his name probably too many times in this video, but I'm not really that sorry for that. As Buck's #1 partner in his time-traveling escapades, Larry is more of the cranky and slightly overdramatic type, as his role as a translator and diplomat was defunct when peace on Earth became a thing and he was no longer needed. Now working as a time cop to precisely make sure jumps in time are executed with no problems, or a majority without any problems, he adds a level of pushback to Buck's inherent nature. He holds a lot of pride in the way he presents himself, whether it's his good manners or his high levels of sass that he can dish out. And with their time unit now complete, Buck, Larry, and Otto go on to deal with so many historical figures. What I mentioned at the start is only the tip of the iceberg, with having to make sure people like Blackbeard the Pirate, Napoleon, Paul Revere, Edgar Allan Poe, heck, even Buffalo Bill don't stray the course of the timeline laid out for them. So aside from the main crew, we get a large rotating cast of people throughout history, plus a few others that are rather important. And I guess this also means that free will doesn't exist. Wouldn't Otto going with them ruin the timeline somehow? Unless it was all predestined to happen. Anyway, you should all go watch the movie Predestination with Ethan Hawke. Back to what I was saying though, the other important characters are Sheila Tud Russell, voiced by Mari Weiss, is Buck's ex-wife who is a Time Squad lieutenant and has a lot of what Buck doesn't have, like her cleverness and analytical smarts, which help greatly in preserving the timeline. Making many appearances throughout the show, whether it's for comedic purposes or plot-related reasons, she mainly acts as a foil to Buck's personality and approach to being a time cop. She also has the robot XJ5 as her time-traveling partner and is the foil to Larry being more capable in the field, and he just loves to rub it in Larry's face. XJ5 is voiced by the legendary Darren Norris. As far as any real villains or antagonists, there really aren't any of major note per the structure of how this show works. Sure, there are some reoccurring nuisances and some issues in other time periods they face, but there isn't a big overall evil to stop at the end of the day. There is time cop JT Laser and his high-tech robot Lance 9 Trillion, one of the best officers in the Time Squad, but he really is just kind of an arrogant jerk more than anything. He is voiced by Jim Wise, and Lance 9 Trillion is voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson. Now let's take a look into the creation of the show and some pretty interesting stuff regarding Time Squad in general. Time Squad entered the Cartoon Network family in the way of Cartoon Network's Cartoon Cartoons, the network's collection of original created series that would come out between 1995 and 2003, making it at the time the 10th original for them to produce. These original series were produced in a joint effort between Cartoon Network Studios and Hanna-Barbera, but what sets Time Squad apart from the rest of the 9 cartoons before it is the fact that it was the first cartoon to be solely produced by Cartoon Network Studios after they stopped being a division of Hanna-Barbera when William Hanna passed away in 2001. Time Squad would also be the last new Cartoon Network series to premiere during the founder and at the time president of Cartoon Network, Betty Cohen's tenure with the company. Dave Wasson, an American animator, director, writer, and voice actor, created Time Squad. You may have heard his name before, being attached to other shows like Star vs. the Forces of Evil, The Buzz on Maggie, Making Fiends, and more, making his work being spread across all the big cartoon-related networks, Nickelodeon, Disney, and Cartoon Network. Being the creator as well as the writer and director of Time Squad, it gave him a lot more leeway for final control of the style and tone for the show. When brainstorming ideas for some episodes, the writing team would find some historical figure and try and curate the most outlandish and ridiculous situation for them to be in, and for how their story could have gone so wrong as to mess with the timeline. A fun and creative way to come up with why they picked the figures in history they did and how episodes would play out.
Get your stinky pile of poo! Fresh, delicious, stinky pile of poo!
Michael Tavera, famous for his music on shows like Mucha Lucha, Lilo and Stitch the Series, Yin Yang Yo, and The Secret Saturdays, had worked on this show first before any of those, adding his own unique sound to this show. The reception, though, of the show was pretty positive upon its release, with the series racking up 5 Annie Award nominations during its 2 years on the air. Now, unfortunately, they never won any of them, but they were at least recognized in a positive light. The show would come to an end after its 2nd season with no real explanation, conflicting rumors of creative differences or firings behind the scenes, as well as the final episode itself being its own mini controversy that we will discuss here shortly. Whatever the case may be, the show could have gone on for quite some time due to its ability of storytelling in any time period with any historical figure. Heck, they could have made up anything from the years 2001 to 100 million if they wanted to. Outside of animation, Dave has also written and illustrated the children's book The Big Ideas of Buster Bickles. Currently, he now works on the Netflix cartoon The Cuphead Show, based on the game Cuphead, as a producer. When looking back on the show, Dave describes Time Squad as a C student's guide to history. Okay, way to call me out like that. But of course, the one last note the show leaves us on, the final episode, which almost caused me to make this video here a bit differently, almost as a shockingly weird way this ended type of video instead. This is the controversy of Orphan Substitute, the final episode. In 2002, the current United States president was George W. Bush. In the final episode in 2003, the trio had back in time to 2002 to convince him to stop focusing on building the world's biggest ball of twine. While the rest of the episode centers around Otto being kidnapped by the head nun of the orphanage and taken back to do chores and suffer the same terribleness he once experienced, Buck and Larry eventually end up having to go and rescue him. And that's all fine and dandy, I guess, but the social commentary at the time, the specific digs in the writing towards the maturity level and intellectual level of the president is what made this episode stand out more than usual. With most historical figures, they were all pre-1950s, and sure, while they all had jokes at their expense, it just came off a bit different as the show directly mentioned certain policies, as well as many more instances within the episode critiquing a sitting president in the middle of their term. Some parents would find this as agenda pushing or not necessary for their kids to watch. Honestly, most of this would fly over a kid's head anyway, but to each their own, I guess. This episode would only ever air once on TV as the network felt uncomfortable for re-sparking fear for what had just happened in 2001. And the material in the episode not being up to what the network would want to show. This has been cited as a potential reason the show didn't continue on, but there is nothing official that states this being a concrete reason. So not the craziest controversy, but during a time where the United States was in a state of fear and uncertainty, behind the scenes it may have caused more issues than led on, as well as the viewers at home and their families. Looking back on it today, it just seems like timely satire. I personally can't recall it back then, as I don't have that recollection of watching it on air at the time. Overall though, the show was pretty great. From the writing to the trio's family dynamic, it had a really cool premise with creative ideas that made each episode fun. And as a fan of sci-fi, it really blended together well. I really enjoyed rewatching through the whole show again, not really knowing too much other than the characters and the time travel aspect, as each episode was a fun surprise to see where their adventure would take them and how weird the situation they need to fix is. It's a quick watch, but one well worth it. And while I would have preferred more of the show to have happened, I'm still happy we have as many episodes as we did. I just think for Cartoon Network's first solely made by them show, that they shouldn't have been as hesitant to put a lot behind it, like merch or something, because outside of the animation medium, there isn't much to Time Squad. There was that Subway promotion with the 5 different toys I mentioned earlier, but other than that, there was just a PC game, Time Squad Time Travel. It should have won an award just for how creative that title is. Here you shoot various clocks and you get a higher score. It's pretty repetitive. With nothing else to really note, the show sadly has fallen into more obscurity as the more time passes, and it's starting to feel like Time Squad is slowly becoming lost to time. But what do you think of the show? Were you a fan of Time Squad? If so, let me know what your favorite episode is in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching the video. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content like this. I'll be back with another video soon, but until then, later.